And we continue at 2:06 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang has the day off. He'll be back with us on Monday. If you're on hold, stay there. We'll get to more calls later on in the hour. If you want to weigh in on whether or not you think LA Mayor Karen Bass can survive the latest round of scandals, we'd love to hear from you at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. But first, it is my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is the man responsible for getting the recall of Gavin Newsom on the ballot the first time around, and now he's attempting to do the same thing a second time. He's part of a group called Saving California. You can get them online at savingcalifornia.vote. Mr. Randy Economy, welcome.
Hey, Johnny. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. Thank you so much for stopping by on this Friday afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
We have been talking about the scandals, and I say scandals plural because it's more than one, related to the response to the fires in Los Angeles, the preparation before the fire started.
Sure.
And people are furious. The anger has not subsided. The anger is only building. People are angry at the response from the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass. They're angry at the LA County Board of Supervisors. They're angry at the governor, Gavin Newsom. They're angry at every layer of government that has failed them, and they're just pulling their hair out about this. I'm sure, given your role right now in Saving California, you are hearing about this nonstop.
You know what? It's devastating for tens and hundreds of thousands of people's lives right now in Los Angeles County, whether it be the historical community of Altadena or the amazing community of the Pacific Palisades. It's not there anymore, John. It's gone. And I think it's because of the gross mismanagement of Gavin Newsom, his lack of foresight, his inability to even get the most basic services to that war-torn area the instant that fire broke out. So it's not about anything other than the mismanagement of Gavin Newsom. And we can't survive anymore in this state with his high taxes, with his ego, with his ambitions to be able to go ahead and become the next president of the United States. His priority right now is de-Trumping California. It's not about doing anything else other than just his a political agenda. And we can't afford that anymore. We need a serious governor for the next 2 years. And a lot of people have said, oh, Randy, he's out of office, let him go. No, we're not going to let him go. We're going to kick him out of office is what we're going to do. Because if any politician in America needs to be fired, it's Gavin Newsom.
Have any homeowners who lost their homes in the fires reached out to you in regard to this recall?
The very first person that reached out to me was literally while his house was still on fire, was actor and activist Mel Gibson. And when Mel Gibson loses his house and tens of thousands of others of his neighbors have lost everything within a day or two, this leaves a huge impact on their lives, but it also leaves a huge impact on the image of California worldwide. And so the night the fires broke out, I literally got a phone call at 10:45 at night, and it was Mel Gibson. And he says, Randy, I got your telephone number from a friend, and I understand you're thinking about doing a recall on Gavin Newsom. I'm all in. What do you need me to do? And so when you have people like Mel Gibson right there next to me at my side, I know that we have got something special going on here. And as a matter of fact, last night, John, when that was so kind of you to help celebrate my 65th birthday yesterday by having a beautiful dinner for me last night at his home. And we had an opportunity you and I to talk to Mel. And he sings happy birthday pretty cool also. But anyway, so I think you having the opportunity to talk directly to Mel last night was special. And you could just hear in his voice his anger, how upset he is, how frustrated he is. But I think you also heard, too, directly his commitment. And we need everybody to be commitment. It's all hands on deck now. So we're going through the formal legal process right now of having the governor officially notified, which takes a couple of days through the Secretary of State. We had our first petition was denied to be able to go ahead and get this thing immediately approved for collection of signatures based upon a rule change that they had saying, well, you don't need 50 people to be the sponsors of the recall. You need 350. So we took it upon ourselves, hit the streets, and we had more than 500 and I think 25 people actually sign on as co-authors of the recall, including Mr. Gibson. So we're everything's done on our end. I'm just waiting for the green light. It could happen during this phone call, actually, from the Secretary of State saying you have a valid petition and the recall's on.
The first time around,
yes.
Go ahead. Well, but when you were trying to recall Gavin,
and then we'll only need about 1.2, 1.3 million signatures, which is not a lot of signatures. It's about 8,500 to 9,000 signatures a day, which in California with 21, 22 million registered voters, that's just an absolute drop in the bucket.
The driver last time around was the COVID lockdowns. The fact that kids were kept out of school, businesses were shut down. Gavin Newsom was at the French Laundry when everyone else was locked inside their homes. We had the snitch lines. We had people being forced to take the vaccine, even if they didn't want to. Some people lost their jobs over that, and the anger was just bubbling against Gavin Newsom, and that's what got those signatures to get that recall on the ballot.
Sure.
This time around, are you noticing that same level of anger with the response to the fires? Are the fires the new COVID?
The fires have led a political firestorm, not only here in California, but in Los Angeles, obviously with against Mayor Bass. Boy, that's a Freudian slip. Never let that happen. Against Mayor Bass. But I think if you start adding everything up in regards to the policies that Gavin has steadfastly tried to bring in, and you add it all up, it's catastrophic, and it's catastrophic failures in regards to fire preparedness. We still have a massive homeless crisis, John. We just basically have taken people saying, okay, we'll take you off the streets, we'll put you in a hotel, but that's not solving the homeless problem. It's not solving the drug issue. So if you start adding up everything that we have going on in California today and have been going on for the last 6 years under his reign as governor, we only have one option right now, and that is to physically do the heavy lifting, get people to sign our petitions, and to get this thing on the ballot. And I'm going to guarantee you this time, John, we're not going to fail. And the people aren't going to fail because it's a different type of an electorate right now that is pissed off. You poked the you poked the golden grizzly bear in the face one last time, Gavin, and the people aren't putting up with it.
Gavin Newsom, as you mentioned, called for a special session of the state legislature to de-Trump or Trump-proof California. He wanted to allocate tens of millions of dollars to the California Department of Justice to launch nuisance lawsuit after nuisance lawsuit against Donald Trump and the federal government. At the same time they're doing that, they have a tin cup in their hand and they're asking for money to deal with the fires and deal with the rebuilding process. If you're Donald Trump right now, you're sitting in the catbird seat as it relates to California. You decide if the money comes, you decide what strings are attached to that money, and Gavin Newsom has to say yes. If you're Donald Trump and Gavin Newsom is acting out or not doing what you want him to do or not making sure that the money goes to the fire victims, whatever the case may be, if Donald Trump comes out in favor of the recall, I'm sure that would make it much easier for you to get the signatures to get that recall on the ballot. Is there any indication if Gavin Newsom keeps taunting Donald Trump and keeps trying to antagonize Donald Trump above doing the business of the people in California, that Donald Trump would then come out in favor of the recall?
I certainly hope so. I welcome him with open arms. I know that our campaign has had direct conversations with the president himself in regards to what we're doing, so he's very well aware of the campaign. He just appointed Mr. Gibson as the ambassador to Hollywood with John Voight and Sylvester Stallone. So I've been keenly aware of conversations going on between my campaign, our campaign, including with Mr. Gibson, with President Trump. And I don't think it's by chance that when he came out here, he didn't invite Gavin Newsom to participate in anything. Gavin Newsom crashed party and showed up to the airport and welcomed him, quote unquote, with a tight fist handshake. But it turned out to be an absolute PR calamity for Gavin Newsom. You could just tell by their body language between the two of them when they met there on the tarmac just how uncomfortable it was and how unwelcomed Gavin was to be able to actually attend and actually participate in the president's press briefing that he held with his special assistant Rick Grinnell, now former Ambassador Grinnell. So I think if you start adding up all of the start putting a checklist together of everything, you'll understand that the recall not only makes sense, it has to happen. We can't afford 2 more years of this guy. We can't afford 2 more weeks of this guy. I don't know what's going to happen next week. I don't know what's going to happen in March and in April. I don't know what calamity is going to happen next. But the calamity we have right now is leadership of Gavin Newsom, and we just can't afford him anymore. So I think that's why we at SavingCalifornia.vote are so anxious to do the heavy lifting, get to 1.3 million people to sign that petition, and to get this thing on the ballot and get it on as soon as possible.
We're speaking with Randy Economy, who you can follow on X at Economy Radio. Randy, last time around, there were a couple of polls that came out. I think one was a Survey USA poll that was affiliated with one of the stations in San Diego that showed that Gavin Newsom would lose the recall and Larry Elder would be the next governor of California.
Yes.
I believe there was another poll, or maybe even 2, that showed similar results. What Gavin Newsom did back then to turn those numbers around was he nationalized the election. He made it about abortion. He made it about Donald Trump. He made it blue versus red, conservative versus liberal, Republican versus Democrat. And in a heavily Democratic, heavily blue state like California, that trick, by nationalizing that particular election, ended up working for him. Do you think he can go back to the same trick this time around and try to nationalize the election and survive that way?
Well, I think if you look at the way that the Democratic Party was in existence, 3.5 years ago, they controlled the White House. When you become the dominant party in Washington D.C., that has a lot of sway. That has a lot of pull. They don't have that this time. As a matter of fact, they just elected a new chairman of the National Democratic Committee. I don't even know the guy's name. I literally don't even know who he is. And I know that even their new vice chairman is, David Hogg from the Parkland shooting situation with the kid on the bike, and he's now the vice chairman of the Democratic National Committee. The Democratic National Committee is broke. Kamala Harris is $52 million in debt from her last presidential campaign. That money has to be paid back. It just does. You just don't forgive a debt because you're Kamala Harris. Those types of obligations need to be taken care of under federal law. So right now, I think the situation is we have a very weak governor. We have a weak political party structure within the Democratic side. I think the Republican side pretty much have got their act together since they control the entire government in Washington, D.C. But again, I don't care about the Republican Party, and I don't care about the Democratic Party. I care about the people of California and how we can work together to make sure that we hold this one really crappy, corrupt politician in Gavin Newsom accountable and to kick his ass out of office.
Has he reached out to you since it became public that you were doing this?
Who, the governor?
Yeah.
He's already taken some pot shots at me in the media, of course. Yeah, I mean, listen, we're not on speed dial with each other. And if we were, I'm sure that the text messages that we would have each other would be, blood curdling and crazy. So no, I have never had the pleasure or opportunity to go grab a beer with him at the French Laundry or anything like that. But I do know that he's not a happy camper right now, and he's angry and he's pissed because how dare anybody challenge him, especially when he's getting ready to become the next president of the United States. He got passed up last time in a behind-the-scenes deal where, Biden dropped out and then anointed Kamala within 35 minutes, and he wanted to be the heir apparent to the throne. Well, it didn't happen because, first of all, I don't even think the Democratic Party even likes him anymore, and I think they all spent such a huge amount of time, $175 million. They shoved in his war chest and 15 different political action committees to save him during the last recall. I don't think that's going to happen this time. And as far as Mr. Elder is concerned, I think Larry was a phenom in politics where he, said, I'm going to be the guy, and he became the guy. Don't know if he was the right guy, but he became the guy. And I think a lot of people says, do I want Gavin Newsom or do I want Larry Elder? And I think they said, I know what I get with Newsom. I don't know what I'm going to get with Larry. So that's kind of been emblematic of where we're at. But I'm excited, John. I think just the fact that we have this momentum that we're creating and building, and the excitement and the enthusiasm, not only here but throughout the country already, in regards to what it is that we're doing. And we're not even an official campaign yet until the Secretary of State gives us a thumbs up, and hopefully that could come any hour now.
Last question before you go. If you're Gavin Newsom, you don't want the stink or the smoke attached to you for the botched response to the fires. What does he do to try to get away from that? Do you think he's going to blame the mayor? Do you think he's going to say this is a local issue? It was mishandled at the city level. Do not blame me. Blame Karen Bass and break bad by going after another Democrat?
I think he's going to want to throw everybody in the world under the bus. That's just the way Gavin is. He doesn't take responsibility for anything. Everything's fine with him. And that's what makes him a dangerous governor. It makes him a dangerous politician, because even his so-called allies and friends aren't his allies and friends. They never have been. They're like that fake friend relationships that some of us go through on Facebook and social media. You're just there because you're there. And I think Gavin has such thin skin, and he's such a vanity politician, that when you look at when he has a crisis like these wildfires, he can't rise to the occasion to be able to even meet the minimal things. I mean, I remember he did an interview with Jacob Soboroff like 24 hours into the fires. And I don't know, I mean, he was so wired up, this guy. I don't know if he had triple Starbucks lattes or something else. But his flailing of his hands and I'm going to reimagine the Palisades, and I'm going to reimagine Altadena. No, you're not going to reimagine anything, because you're going to be out of a job. And it's not his right to be able to reimagine anybody's life in California. These people are hurt. They're angry. They don't have a home. They don't have a home. Tens of thousands of people are extra homeless right now because of the neglect and the lack of preparedness of the executive officer of the state of California, and his name is Gavin Newsom.
The group is Saving California. You can get them online at savingcalifornia.vote. You can follow Randy on X at Economy Radio. Randy Economy, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thanks, John, for having me.
Right now, it's time for KABC Dependable Traffic. It's the John Phillips Show on this Jimmy Buffett Friday. Talk Radio 790 KABC. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And with the end of the show about a half hour away, if you want to listen to us on Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, whenever, You can do that quite easily, quite frankly. All you need to do is subscribe to the podcast edition of this program on your handy dandy iPhone, and all of the episodes will be downloaded automatically directly to your phone, and you can enjoy it whenever and wherever you'd like. All right, Karen Bass is under fire yet again. Today, it's for firing the fire chief. She said she's the one to blame for the poor response to the fires. The news keeps going from bad to worse for Karen Bass. Do you think she is going to survive this scandal? Do you think she's going to resign from office? I don't think she survives the scandal, but I don't necessarily think she resigns either. What say you? At 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. Your calls coming up, but right now it's time for headlines. It's the John Phillips Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC. Let's go to Jesse in Long Beach. Jesse, hello.
Hi, this is Steffi.
Oh, I'm sorry. Welcome.
That's okay. Thanks, John. John, she's lost the confidence of the people like Dick Nixon did. Isn't there someone who's going to tap her on the shoulder and say, Madam, it's time to leave?
Who would that person be? Because I'm looking at the city council. There's no one on the council who can do that to her. Gavin Newsom is a rival.
It'll be Lindsay Horvath because she's the most ambitious.
She is. Lindsay Horvath, I think, wants to be the governor, or she wants to be the mayor of Los Angeles. She wants to be a U.S. senator. She wants something big. She does not want to end her political career on the L.A. County Board of Supervisors.
Right. And boy, will that be a headline if she does it. I think she's going to be the one, and she's going to do it.
All right. There's a prediction. Thank you for the call. Let's go to Livy in Hacienda Heights. Livy, hello.
Hello. Hi, John.
Hi there.
So Karen Bass has shown that she lacks leadership qualities. Extreme fire weather warnings were given before she left to Ghana. A true leader would say, hey, the buck stops with me. I'm going to have to step down. But she's not going to do that.
You think she's going to stick around till the bitter end?
I think so. It seems like that's the going rate these days. I don't understand how you are firing people now for your own incompetence. I mean, obviously we know she's firing her because she called her out on her lack of leadership, but that's my 5 cents on that.
All right. Thank you for the call. Let's go to Susan in Malibu. Susan, hello. All right. Chuck in Sunland. Chuck, welcome.
John.
Hi there.
Hey, I just wanted to say maybe we should look at this thing with Karen Bass not resigning and firing the police chief as a good thing. Maybe she can hang on and run enough cover for herself and fire some more incompetent people before she goes herself.
Well, she's going to blame everyone but herself. So my guess is that there's going to be a lot of people at LA City Hall who are going to have their time in the barrel.
I agree 100%, John. Hey, John, listen, man, I love your show, man. It's great.
Well, thank you so much for the call, sir. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Let's go to Cindy in Torrance. Cindy, hello.
Hello. I have a couple of things. First of all, Karen Bass fired the wrong person. If you wanted to fire someone, she should have started with a person who was truly responsible for coordinating emergency services and the message to the mayor, which was Carol Parks, who is Karen Bass's emergency manager for the city of L.A. Every month, the city of L.A., along with 200 other cities and entities, agencies in Southern California, meet with the California Office of Emergency Services with the governor's office. We coordinate mutual aid between all the different agencies and agreements that we have amongst each other. We talked about the fires on our meeting in November. Everybody knew about them. They were on the agenda list, and the city of LA was represented there. They knew about the fires. They know about the contingency plan that's been in place, just like we've been planning World Cup and Olympics and all the other things. So going after the fire chief is a personal thing because obviously Crowley's been making public comments. Karen Bass knows she's on the seat, so she's going to take everyone down with her. She should be, before Crowley is in line, she should have been firing her water and power manager. That was the biggest failure on the water management. She's hiring incompetent DEI people that shouldn't be in those roles anyway. Karen knows she's going down because of the O'Keefe News hidden camera story that's coming out about her own staff. She was in Ghana to try to get a consulate in L.A. L.A. doesn't need a consulate for Ghana in L.A. We don't have one. We don't need one. That's why there's one isn't here. She promised us when she took the job she would stay in L.A., and she hasn't done that. Karen Bass needs to go.
All right. Thank you so much for the call. I love the passion. Let's go to John in Alhambra. John, hello.
Hi, John. Thanks for taking the call. Great show today. The last 2 days, I don't know about you, but I think I listen every day, but these last 2 days have been great. Real quick, in answer to your question, I do think she's going to stay, but for one reason. I think if she stays and continues pointing fingers at other people, Newsom's off the hook. So just like your last guest, Mr. Economy, I think he's spot on that Newsom is really the problem. And if he can keep Bass in the line of fire, he doesn't get hit. So whatever she does, he'll just go along with it. Like, yeah, stay there, go ahead and shield me, because if she's gone, the only one left is really going to be, viable person to blame is him and his poor policies. And I think that's the sad thing. I think, just like corporate America, failure and incompetence seems to rise to the top. I don't know the reason for that. But I think there's a bigger problem in L.A., much like your last guest. I'm sorry, the one before, Mr. Economy, the senator. Just like D.C. had a swamp, and hopefully Trump and Musk are draining that whole thing. I think L.A.'s been a swamp for a long time, and I think you can go back into the 50s and just see a lot of corruption and a lot of just wheeling and dealing. And I think it's just the way we do things. And I think the senator and also your caller yesterday said very disparaging things about L.A., and I can't really disagree, because they said, it's just too hard, and why we don't have viable options, why people aren't rising up, at least candidates, because these Bass and all these people should be so easy to beat in a common sense election, and yet no one's really rising up. I mean, Caruso's an option, but shouldn't we have more? If these people are so inept, shouldn't someone just be able to step in that just has a basic common sense, or even a middle of the road policy? They should be a shoo-in, but I don't know if it's districting. I don't know. I guess that's the question for you. You said there's a lot of, there's many components to why we are in the situation we are. But how do we counteract those components, I guess?
Well, the definition of politics is who gets what, when, where, how, and why. And typically people fight over ideology. You have conservatives fighting with liberals over the role of government. In Los Angeles, ideologically, everyone's on the same page. So instead of having debates over issues, we don't, because we're all in agreement, or not us, but the people in elected office are all in agreement. What they fight over is the spoils. They fight over who gets to hire their friends, who gets to direct government contracts to their buddies, who gets to appoint their buddies to various boards and commissions so they can find a way to profit off of it. That's what they fight over. They fight over those goodies. And what you end up with when the fight is over those things is you don't get an honest debate over whether or not services are going to be X, Y, or Z, or taxes are going to be X, Y, or Z, because there's not an honest debate going on. It's not going to change in Los Angeles or in California until people start voting differently. And what people do typically is they vote with their feet, because they don't make a connection between their vote and the government that they receive. They think, oh, the schools in my neighborhood just stink, so I'm going to vote with my feet and send my kid to a private school. Or, oh, my neighborhood, which was once safe, has now become dangerous. Well, I'm just going to move to a different neighborhood. But then they move, and then they continue to vote the same way, and then they experience many of the same problems. It's very difficult for people to look in the mirror and say, you know, part of the problem is me. And until I change or modify my behavior, I'm going to contribute to the bad public schools or an unsafe neighborhood or fill in the blank. And it's hard for all of us. I mean, it's not just a political thing. It's hard for all of us to acknowledge that our bad behavior leads to circumstances that we would typically like to avoid. I mean, if you're overweight, you're probably eating too much. If you're always hungover, you're probably drinking too much. If you get winded whenever you have to walk a long distance, you're probably not exercising enough. And you could just complain about the universe or complain about the world, and that's why you're experiencing those problems. But for the most part, the problem is us. And it works that way with government too. Unless and until the people of Los Angeles acknowledge that part of the problem is the way that they vote and the people that they select and the criteria that they use to judge their elected officials, you're going to get more of the same. And that's the beauty of democracy. At some point, when enough of us realize that what we're doing isn't working, you have the option of throwing these people out. We've done it before. When Dick Reardon ran for mayor of Los Angeles in a wide open field that included a lot of Democrats, a lot of well-respected Democrats. Kathleen Connell at the time was the state controller. Michael Wu was on the city council. Joel Wax, I think, ran that time. He was a longtime member of the council. You had a crowded field, and he ran on the platform of Dick Reardon, tough enough to turn L.A. around. And my pal Gary South was the advisor to Michael Wu. Gary South is a longtime Democratic advisor. He ran Gray Davis's operation. Smart guy, funny guy. I don't agree with him on politics, but he really does grasp the political world, especially here in California. But he made one great big mistake in that election. He said at the time, there's no way an old, rich, white Republican is going to win anything in Los Angeles. And that was the working assumption that Michael Wu had, and that was the working assumption that the people who worked on his campaign had. Well, for the most part, what they said is correct. L.A. was a Democratic city back then, too. But at that moment in time, people had just had enough. And when we collectively have enough, we can move into a different direction. And we ended up with Dick Reardon, and the city ended up being safer. The property value shot through the roof. We got LA Live. We got the Staples Center. We got all of those great things. And it was because the people recognized the error in their ways and they made a change in course. Now, the problem is after Dick Reardon left, we went back to our old habits. It's hard to move away from your mistakes and do so consistently. But if you want a city that's functioning, that's what you have to do. Right now, it's time for KABC Dependable Traffic. It's the John Phillips Show on this Jimmy Buffett Friday. Talk Radio 790 KABC. What do you say we make a couple of listeners very happy? AM 790 KABC welcomes Dierks Bentley, the Broken Branches Tour featuring Zach Top and the band Lula, to the Intuit Dome on June the 26th. Tickets are on sale next Friday at Ticketmaster.com. However, if you're caller number 9 right now at 888-790-5222, that's 888-790-5222, you'll win a pair of tickets to the show. All of this furnished by our friends at Live Nation. Good luck dialing. It's the John Phillips Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC. It's the John Phillips Show on Talk Radio 790 KABC on this Jimmy Buffett Friday. That's going to do it for us today, but we'll be back on Monday at noon for another live and local edition of the John Phillips Show right here on Talk Radio 790 KABC.